Welcome back to the Sports Business Take podcast, your home for sports industry news with a little personality. I am Paul Hine. He is Zach Creekmore, and today we are joined by a very, very awesome guest, VP of Corporate Sales and Suites at the Baltimore Ravens, Aaron Cline. Thank you so much for joining us today, Aaron.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Could you explain to our audience a little bit kind of what you do with the Ravens and what your background is in sports a little bit, just to start us
Certainly.
off?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm beginning my 13th season here with the Ravens. I run the corporate sales and sponsorship team with the Ravens, and our responsibility includes basically everything that you can sell at the Ravens, excluding tickets. So if you think about suites and sponsorships, events, TV, radio, digital, etc. I sell those as well as my team of seven, and we have a client services team that supports that, as well as a suites team that helps with the renewals of suites and all the maintenance of the suites and the daily uptake of the suites. So yeah, it's a great team we have, and I was fortunate enough to come over to the Ravens in 2011. Prior to the Ravens, I was with the Baltimore Orioles and the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network. So I was fortunate that I was able to stay in my hometown from Towson, Maryland, which is a suburb of Baltimore. And yeah, I've been fortunate that I've been stuck at home working for the Orioles and the Ravens since about 2008, which has been great. And so how it all began is I came out of college in 1996 and started my career in finance. Got a job at a local brokerage house called Lake Mason. Worked there for 3 years, kind of following up on my major of business and econ, and then transitioned to a role over at Alex Brown in 1999. Alex Brown got bought out by Deutsche Bank at the time, and at 26 years old, I was given the choice to move to New York or take a severance and kind of find a new career. So I took the severance route, paid off my student loans, and decided that I wanted to get into sales. It was kind of daunting at the time, being 26, never having sold anything, and ended up going to work through a connection at a local radio station. And thought I'd be there for a year, ended up staying for about 5.5. And then that job parlayed into an opportunity to interview with the Orioles. I was fortunate enough to get that job, and then in 2008, my career in sports started. So it's been an interesting path. Certainly not the most conventional way to get into sports, but it's been a life lesson. All the stops along the way has been really great for learning, and then trying to apply those skills from other jobs into something I have a passion for, especially the Ravens.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about who you are, and that was a very good description. Thank you.
Certainly.
Zach, do you want to start us off with our first, non-background question?
Yes, absolutely. I just want to start by saying, as Paul said, thank you for sharing. You have a beautiful story. You speak. You're very well spoken. So I appreciate you being here with us. I appreciate you sharing in that and sharing that experience. I hear so often sports stories, and these stories are non-conventional, just like you described. That somebody coming from a background and wanting to work in sports, we're a non-conventional workplace, right? You don't expect it to be a conventional experience or a conventional way that you get into it. And it's definitely
True.
something kind of new to us as students. Of maybe when we graduate, we're not going to go straight into sports. Maybe we're going to go to something that's a bit more paralleled, and then go and join it further down the line, which is really awesome. So I appreciate you sharing. My first question for you is, you shared a little bit on, you both worked for both the Orioles and the Ravens, and curious to see organizationally, work experience, kind of what the differences between the two were, and your experience there.
Yeah, both were tremendous experiences, and one currently is a tremendous experience. I would say that the obvious difference is the amount of games, right? So 80 home games for baseball, 82 to be exact, I guess, and 10 for the NFL. And so when I transitioned to the Ravens, I went from working probably about 60 plus games to working, 10 plus games, hopefully with playoffs for the Ravens. So that was a nice little transition. We had just had our first child at the time, so it was good timing. But in all seriousness, I think all the skills that I learned in terms of working in sports came from my experience at the Orioles and at Masson. I got to see it all, talking about working nights, working weekends, travel, all the certain situations that come up with working in sports, whether it's good accounts, bad accounts, conflict resolution, contract negotiation, anything that you can imagine that would come up in the world of sports I was exposed to, which was great. And I was fortunate enough that there was an opportunity next door, and I was able to transform those skills over into a different sport, and had great mentors along the way at both stops, and a lot of great colleagues who were able to kind of guide me in both places, or all three places, I should say. But yeah, the differences aren't that great, to be honest. I mean, they're both major league clubs or National Football League clubs, and it's high profile. It's being with clients on the field at the baseball. It's being with clients, in the locker room in football and things like that. So you just learn how to operate in that environment, and then you can really translate it into any team. I was fortunate that both of those teams in particular were my teams. In the Orioles case, my favorite team growing up, and then when I graduated college in 1996, the Ravens moved to Baltimore. So very lucky, and it's very rare. If you look at the people I work with now, my boss is from Wyoming. There's people in the building that are from California and Texas and all over the place. So, most jobs in sports, you're not going to find a whole lot of hometown folks. So I'm fortunate to be one of those.
Absolutely. I love what you said about the hometown folks. I'm a big soccer follower, soccer guy. Even then, and through research I've done, they highly suggest you don't go and work for a team that you have that hometown experience, that passion, however you may say it. I'm curious to see, do you think because it's your hometown team, you have that background, you have that heart for it, do you think you bring a different perspective to what you do?
That's a great question. I would say that, relationship wise, it's certainly easier to start a conversation, whether you're talking about neighborhoods or schools or common people. It's they call it small-to-more for a reason. It's much like a St. Louis or a Pittsburgh, where everyone asks where you go to school and they mean high school. It's that kind of feel. But I'd like to think that myself, our team, if you dropped us in any city in the country, we would be able to be successful just because of the way we operate and kind of how our mind works when it comes to fortifying relationships and closing business. I think that everyone, for the most part that I've worked with at all three stops, I should say, in sports, would be able to do that. So I think it's a benefit for sure, but I do think that the skills would translate to really anywhere around the world.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank
That's
you for sharing.
awesome to hear that you're living out your dream, essentially.
Yeah, no, it's great. Working in sports is certainly something that I would have loved to think that I could do at 15 years old.
Right.
At the time, I wanted to be in the running for the Cy Young Award. That didn't really pan out. But just being able to be in that mix, being in the sports
it's
world,
carrying on that passion.
Yeah, it's a passion, it's a privilege, and I would say, like, to a person on our team, like, no one takes that for granted. There are a lot of sacrifices working in sports. I mentioned earlier, working nights, working weekends, a lot of time away from your family. So as to your listeners who think about working in sports, keep those things in mind. There's a joke, you don't get into sports for the hours of the money. And that's certainly true when you start. It's like a lot of hours. You certainly just work in the grind, but it pays off in the end if you stick with it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So
Certainly.
my first question for you would be, what do you think NFL hiring managers are looking for in candidates right now for open job positions?
Sure. Yeah, I think generally speaking, they're looking for grinders, at least on the sales side of things. I think these days that, a lot of kids coming out of college, they want to be the commissioner of the league or president of a team with their first job. And that's great. I think ambition is a great thing. But the reality is that all the people that are in those seats now have had to pay their dues. If you look at the general manager of the Ravens, he was an intern. He started his career working for free at the Redskins, believe it or not, his first job, and then about 20 plus years working the ranks of the Ravens. So that's a great example of how it really does work in sports. Certainly you can come from a different industry, maybe come in at a higher position on the business side, but on the team side, I think it's a little bit difficult just to come in and become a president or a general manager. You really do have to do your part and pay your dues. So that's true also on the business side to a certain extent. If you think about what folks are looking for in terms of who they're hiring, they're looking at experiences, how you deal with conflict. Did you call once and then never call back? I think for me and the people that I work with in Baltimore, like, it's persistency, right? Like, how are they going to act when a prospect doesn't call them back? If I don't call you back and you stop calling me, then okay, like it kind of shows that you're just kind of checking the box. And at least in our world, we're looking for grinders, people that won't give up, people that are going to find a way to get it done. And I think that could apply to marketing. I think that could apply to HR, PR, CR, whatever it might be. It's just well-rounded people that get after it. We have a motto on our team, which I stole from LinkedIn. I don't know where, but it's we call ourselves the Shred Team 8, and it's show up, hustle, repeat every day. So, I mean, that kind of in a nutshell, I think I could speak for a lot of my colleagues around the league, is what people are looking for. People that get up and do it every day, even when it's not fun.
That really captures what it takes to work in sports really well. Thank you for that. Zach, I think you had the next question.
Yes, sir. So we've talked a little bit about your role at the Ravens, what you've done, who you sell to some extent. My question is, what do you seek for in organizational sponsorships, whether it be understanding organizational mission between the companies, goals, aspirations, contributions to the city, et cetera, and kind of how you're trying to sell that suite out and maybe how that relates?
Sure. Yeah, we're looking on the partnership side. We're looking for partners that share the same values of the Ravens. That could be a local partner or a national partner. Certainly we're trying to find out, an issue that we can solve on their end in terms of marketing. And then on the suite side, the hospitality side of the world, we're looking for partners that are trying to find a way to entertain maybe their clients, maybe potential clients, maybe family, maybe friends, and just enjoy a world-class experience at M&T Bank Stadium. The Ravens put out a great product, and our game day is typically in the top 5 overall in the league in terms of voice of the fan. So we're fortunate that we always have a great product on the field, a great show to sell. And on the sponsorship side, the ROI has proven to be there year after year. So we're picky about who we want to partner with. And certainly, we try to do the best we can to maximize that. But we are very cognizant of relationships. I would say at the core of the sales world in sports, it's relationship driven. And so for us, it's, yes, there's a business proposition, and yes, we need to show value. But we also truly value the relationship probably more than anything when it comes to our world.
Beautiful, thank you. And it speaks so well, and we've been talking about it throughout today, about what is the mission of sports, right? The mission of sports is to bring people together, to offer a great product, to entertain, to bring joy, to bring feeling, to bring heart, to bring passion, to make that hometown feeling, right?
Certainly.
Have that connection. And building that relationship through organizational partnerships is absolutely hugely key to that. So thank you for speaking to that.
Yes, thank you. And while we're talking about how you engage with the fans, how you're relating to the fans, you've been at the Ravens for over a decade now. How do you think the fan experience has changed since you've started there?
Yeah, well, first of all, it definitely has, in the sense of how people absorb their football content now, right? There's so many
Right.
different avenues to watch NFL football. When I started, I think Thursday night football wasn't even a thing. Certainly, if it was in its infancy. Streaming is now a big deal. I would say, generally speaking, when I started working in sports, sponsorship was selling a sign in the stadium or selling a TV spot or a radio spot. Most of the deals that the Ravens and other teams do now are custom, where there's going to be a digital element, there's going to be a social element, there's going to be potentially a community element with a specific cause in mind. So I would say that it has changed quite a bit. The fan experience, for sure. The at-home experience for the NFL viewer has only gotten better. And the NFL has always had such a great product to watch at home, but also a great product to watch in stadium, and they're two very different models. So kind of balancing that and trying to take advantage of both has been interesting. And of course, you throw in COVID, where there was 2 years where people basically were at home, and then you see this spike of people wanting to go out and be with others quite a bit, whether it's concerts or live sports. So I think that has kind of taken it up even another notch. And attendance, is up in MLB, it's up in the NBA, NHL, certainly the NFL. So I think that bears out post-COVID that people love live sports. The in-stadium piece, you can see that the boards keep getting bigger all the time. You've got the out-of-town scores when I started, but now you've got out-of-town scores and betting lines. So that's a massive thing that has changed, and that's only in the beginning too. So if you look around, I think in the next 5 years, betting is going to be just like it is in Europe, where it's just commonplace. So I think that is a massive change, considering where the country, sports in general, has been in the past. That's a momentous change for sports. So that would be the biggest thing that I could say. Just seeing betting lines in an NFL stadium is crazy at this point, because we haven't seen it, but in 5 years it's going to be commonplace. So that's one of the biggest ones. And then, of course, the in-bowl experience is just so much better at every stadium. It keeps getting crazier and crazier, crazy better. If you look at a SoFi Stadium, and every stadium kind of trumps the next one, and it's just been fun to watch, and fun to see all the enhancements that all the teams do, really at all four of the big major sports.
Absolutely. That's great insight about the betting. For those who didn't pick up on it, that is massive. But I want to call back to something you had mentioned earlier with balancing the in-person fan experience with the digital fan experience and how that's changed. So how do you see the NFL's movement towards streaming services and those kinds of platforms change how you sell your product, both digitally and in person?
Yeah, I think it's certainly going to be different, right? So we don't know exactly what the streaming side of things looks like now on the team level. At the league level, you can see what they're trying to do, and I think as people evolve how they watch live sports, and it seems like society is busier and busier, and people are on the move more than they ever have. I think it's going to be a really big thing. I know that a lot of our revenue now in sponsorship is shifting to digital and social and has been for quite a while. And I think that really streaming is just going to be another arm of that. So it's interesting to watch it all evolve. A lot of it, you try to keep up as best you can. But I think a good barometer to watch those events in terms of streaming is to see how the leagues react to it. And then what you'll see is the clubs or the properties, is my guess, is you'll see it trickle down throughout the four major sports and in MLS as well, on how that plays out on a club level.
That makes a ton of sense. Zach, you want to go now?
Yes. We've been talking about broadcasting for a bit, so I'm going to go with this question. But Claire, you mentioned you've worked for the Mid-Atlantic Sports Network. You've worked in broadcasting before, and I know it was before streaming a bit, but having worked in broadcasting, how do you see new viewership opportunities via AI, tech, meta, socials impacting the next generation of viewers and broadcasting services in relation to that?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely huge. Not necessarily the exact same parallel, but similar to that is if you look what the NFL is doing with Nickelodeon, just trying to figure out ways to reach new audiences. And I'm fascinated with all those items you just mentioned. And I don't really have the answer to what it looks like, but I guarantee you one thing, across all sports, it's going to look very different. AI is so new, but you can tell that it's going to be a massive win, not only in the sales side of things, but on the consumer viewing side of things as well. It's very interesting. I'll be honest, I don't have a firm grasp on it yet. I'm not sure many do. I think we're just scratching the surface, but I think that's a keen observation on your part, just saying, AI is going to be a big thing. Certainly meta, like you mentioned as well. So we're tracking it. There's certain things that, come up and you think that this is going to happen, and then Bitcoin or things just kind of happen and they don't explode like the way you thought they were going to explode. So it's interesting. We try to keep an eye on all the industries, and we talk a lot within the teams of the NFL, just trying to stay on top of the trends. But I do think AI is going to be a massive deal.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Love what you said there. And I never thought about it, but you mentioned you guys working with other teams and interacting in that way to monitor these matters and how things move, and understanding what your coworkers or your peers are doing for their teams and how you can apply that to your own team. Is that something you find to be really common in the sports world, and how have you kind of managed that?
Yeah, for sure. We at the Ravens, we certainly network quite a bit with our associates at other teams. We certainly have calls to talk about certain categories or certain accounts if we're drilling down even deeper. I think the NFL is probably more prevalent than most leagues, at least in my experience. But yeah, it's a very small world, the sports world. And so I think once you get into sports, you find that more people than you thought, and then you start just branching out. And if you ask me if I knew someone at XYZ team, I may not, but someone on my team or at the Ravens probably does. So it's a really small world. It's very, very connected. And a lot of us are just trying to figure out categories at the same time because they come up so quickly. A good example is going back to legalized sports betting. If you look at it, it went state by state. And so we and other teams have leaned on teams that were in states that went legal first. So in our case, I leaned heavily on my friends at the Broncos and the Jets for advice on how to, first of all, like contacts, who do I contact, how to approach it, who do we speak with, what are the questions we're asking, what are the assets that are interested in, and just kind of having a knowledge up front of how to attack it really helped us. And so I think that you'll see on categories moving forward that are new, the same approach, right? Like someone's going to get a deal in the NBA, let's say first on a category we don't even know about 3 years from now, and then other teams will start figuring out, oh, okay, there's money here. How do we attack that? And so I do think there's a lot of sharing of knowledge. For the longest time, our organization has been involved in the National Sports Forum, and that is a big conglomerate of sports teams, not just the big 4 or 5. And we're talking minor league baseball, college, rodeos, everything you can imagine, NASCAR. And that's been a great tool just to get to know people all over the sports landscape in the country and in some cases the world. So yeah, I do think there's a ton of collaboration in sports, maybe more than any other industry, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking there. Sorry to interrupt you, Paul.
Good.
I think of because I think of you're trying to create an industrial advantage where you're trying to beat your opponent, and that's just me thinking as an athlete in a sports sense. If you're trying to find that edge, what's going to make you better? What's going to make you that bigger thing, that bigger entity? But truly in the sports world, especially when you're working in a league setting, you're working for the benefit of each other because you want the league to succeed because your team can't succeed without the league's success.
That's right.
Which is really, really an insightful point, and I appreciate you kind of sharing on that.
Yeah, that was really interesting to hear about how the teams collaborate to make it such a small community and how you all really help each other.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain cases where you'd be competitors, right? Like small markets next to another market. But in most cases, if one person in that league team gets a deal, it helps all the other as well.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. If it's okay with you, Zach, I'll kind of ask our 2 closing questions, if that's all right.
Yes, sir.
Since we're almost a half hour. All right. So we're going to end it off with a couple easy ones. Aaron, do you think the Ravens are making the playoffs this year?
Yes. Absolutely.
Good. I hope they do. And second, we're now starting a new tradition. You're our second guest ever, but we want to start a new tradition of asking guests this question. If you were working for any organization that you wanted to, and you could go back to any sports event in the history of sports, which game would you want to work?
Wow. That's a really good one. I guess I'd have to say the 1983 clinching game, Orioles-Phillies. Just to be there to see Cal close out the World Series.
Nice. Sticking with the hometown.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Zach, do you have anything else before I close this out?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your experience, your life, your love, your passion, your life as a hometown boy, being able to work for something you love so much, and thank you for all the great pointers and everything you've been able to share with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it was good. Thank you guys for having me, and good luck with the podcast. And if I can help in any way, please let me know.
Thank you. Once I stop the recording, just stick around in the studio for a second so the audio tracks can upload. But thank you so much for hopping on, Aaron. And for those who haven't, actually, do you want to shout out your social before I shout out ours?
No, you guys go.
Okay. For those who haven't followed us, our Instagram is SBT_podcast. Our TikTok is SBT.pod23. And we are SBTpod at SBTpod23 on Twitter. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for coming, Aaron, and have a good day.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks.